In 1946, the United States deliberately sank dozens of warships. Not one, not two, an entire fleet. Today, those battleships, aircraft carriers, and submarines are still resting on the floor of the Pacific Ocean. And that's not even the strangest part. Nearly 80 years later, almost no one has seriously tried to bring them back to the surface. Why? Some of these ships would be worth billions of dollars in today's money. They survived World War II. They survived some of the most powerful explosions ever created. Yet they were left exactly where they sank. So what made humanity abandon an entire fleet forever? The answer begins with the weapon that changed history, the atomic bomb. August 1945. Two atomic bombs exploded over the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The world had entered a new era, but almost no one knew the answer to one critical question. What would happen to a naval fleet if a nuclear bomb exploded nearby? There were plenty of theories. Some believed every ship would disappear instantly. Others argued that even the largest battleships could survive the blast. No one knew the truth. There was only one way to find out. Run a full-scale experiment. Not with models, not with small boats, but with real warships. That experiment became Operation Crossroads, one of the most expensive military tests of the 20th century. The United States chose a remote Pacific island called Bikini Atoll, a place thousands of miles away from major cities. Its residents were relocated, and its peaceful lagoon was transformed into a massive nuclear testing ground. Warships began arriving from across the U.S. Navy. Battleships, aircraft carriers, cruisers, destroyers, submarines, specimized, even captured German and Japanese vessels. Before long, more than 90 warships were anchored inside the lagoon. None of their crews would ever return. They were about to face an experiment unlike anything the world had ever seen. And when the first atomic bomb exploded above Bikini Atoll, it became clear that reality was far more terrifying than even the military had expected. July 1st, 1946. Inside Bikini Atoll, an unusual silence filled the air. More than 90 ships were anchored in the lagoon. Battleships, aircraft carriers, cruisers, submarines. But this time, there were no sailors standing on their decks. These ships were no longer a fleet. They were targets for the first nuclear test in history against an entire group of warships. At 9 a.m., the American B-29 bomber opened its bomb bay. The atomic bomb, given the code name Able, began its descent. A few seconds later, the sky above the Pacific Ocean exploded with light. A massive fireball swallowed everything around it. A giant mushroom cloud rose above the lagoon. The shockwave spread across the water at a speed impossible for the human eye to follow. It seemed that after an explosion like this, nothing could survive. But something unexpected happened. Most of the ships were still floating. Some suffered severe damage. Several vessels sank, but a large part of the fleet survived the blast. For the military, this was a shock. If even an atomic bomb could not instantly destroy a fleet, then what did this mean for future wars? But the answer would come only a few weeks later. July 25th, 1946. The next test was designed to reveal the true power of nuclear weapons. This time, the bomb was not dropped from the sky. It was placed underwater, about 27 meters below the surface. When it exploded, the ocean itself seemed to rise into the sky. A massive column of water shot upward more than a mile high. Millions of tons of water crashed back down onto the ships. The force was so powerful that some vessels were thrown upward as if they were nothing more than toys. But the most terrifying part happened after the explosion, because this time the enemy was not only the blast itself, something else came back down with the water. Radioactive contamination. It covered everything: metal decks, guns, interior compartments. Every piece of steel could become a deadly hazard. Even hours after the explosion, approaching many of the ships was extremely dangerous. And that was when the military understood something important. The most terrifying part of nuclear weapons was not the explosion. It was what remained afterward. and that is why most of these ships would never return to service. But one question remained. If they could no longer be used, why weren't they simply raised from the ocean floor? And the answer was far more complicated than anyone expected. After the tests at Bikini Atoll, the military faced a problem that nobody expected. These ships were not simply wrecks lying underwater. They had become radioactive objects, and every attempt to recover them could create a deadly risk. At first, the U.S. military tried to clean some of the vessels. They washed the ships with powerful streams of water, removed contaminated parts, and measured radiation levels again and again. But the results were disappointing. The radiation did not disappear. Radioactive particles had entered places that were almost impossible to reach. Inside the ships, inside engines, inside ventilation systems, deep within the metal structures, the same designs that once made these ships powerful, now trapped in invisible danger inside them. The Bikini tests revealed something the world had never experienced before. A weapon could destroy a target in seconds, but its consequences could last for decades. Eventually, many of the ships could no longer return to service. They were too damaged, too contaminated, and too dangerous to repair. Some vessels were used for scientific research. Others were moved away. But many remained exactly where the tests happened, at the bottom of Bikini Lagoon. And they are still there today. For decades, these forgotten giants rested beneath the Pacific Ocean. Battleships, aircraft carriers, submarines, ships that once represented military power, now became silent reminders of the beginning of the nuclear age. Over time, something unexpected happened. The ocean began to reclaim them. Corals grew across their steel bodies. Fish moved through abandoned compartments. Ships built for war became part of a new underwater ecosystem. But Bikini Atoll is still surrounded by questions. Is this place completely safe today? Can humans ever fully return to these ships? The answer is not simple, because these wrecks are not just pieces of metal. They are a record of one of the most important moments in human history. A moment when humanity created a force powerful enough to change the world forever. But beneath the calm waters of Bikini Lagoon, these ships continue to tell a story that the world cannot forget. They are not just wrecks from the past. They are underwater monuments to a moment when science, war, and human ambition changed history forever. That is why these ships still remain underwater, not because they were forgotten, sanctus, but because they became a warning. A warning about the power we create and the consequences we leave behind. Because the greatest mystery of Bikini Atoll is not only what happened to the ships, but what happened to humanity after it discovered the power of the atom.